Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be diving deep into Wayne Dyer's
Yeah.
Your Erroneous Zones.
Yeah.
This book's been super influential for tons of
Oh,
people.
absolutely a classic.
It's all about recognizing and then letting go of those self-defeating thought patterns and those behaviors that kind of keep us stuck.
Yeah, and Dyer really gets to the heart of it. He shows us how we can actually be creating our own unhappiness.
That's a pretty powerful idea, right? That we choose happiness.
Definitely. It's not something that just happens to us.
But that's where this idea of immobilization comes in.
Right.
I mean, what did you think about that?
Well, Dyer talks about how we let these negative emotions, like fear or insecurity or whatever, totally stop us from taking action.
Mm-hmm.
And then that keeps us from, moving towards what we actually want in life.
So it's not even just about feeling bad, it's about letting those feelings control us.
Yeah, exactly. If you think about someone who, avoids going out because they're shy, it's not just that they're feeling shy, it's that the shyness is actually immobilizing them.
Keeping them in that comfort zone.
Exactly.
It makes you think about all the different ways we might be holding ourselves back. I mean, is it fear of failure that's keeping you from starting that project?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's worrying what other people will think that stops you from, going after what you really want.
Totally. And Dyer's point is that we can break free from those limitations.
Yeah, but first we got to see them right.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about self-love.
Okay.
Dyer starts off by asking, do you like your body?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right. It's so simple, but it really makes you think.
Yeah, because it forces us to confront all these messages we've gotten about, beauty and perfection.
All that stuff we internalize.
Yeah.
And it can lead to, feeling like you're not good enough or thin enough or whatever enough.
Absolutely. And that can really hurt your self-esteem.
Big time. So what does Dyer suggest we do about it?
Well, he wants us to challenge those beliefs head on. He even suggests this interesting exercise.
Yeah.
Where you break down your body into parts, like your hair, your eyes, your hands.
Right.
And you ask yourself if you like each one.
Huh.
It might sound weird, but
It kind of is.
it is, but it really helps you shift your focus.
Okay.
From, picking yourself apart to actually appreciating your body.
For what it is.
Exactly. And seeing how amazing it is.
Yeah, that's a really cool way to look at it.
Right. It's all about self-acceptance.
Okay, so from self-love, Dyer moves on to this whole idea of approval seeking.
Mm-hmm.
And he argues that this constant need for validation, it can actually come from, childhood stuff.
Yeah, think about it. When you're a kid, you need your parents' and teachers' approval.
Right.
You want to make them happy.
You want that gold star.
Exactly. But then as adults, we sometimes carry that need for external validation into everything.
And totally. Our relationships, our jobs,
Mhm.
all of it. And Dyer uses this example of school, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
We're conditioned to get good grades, to get praised by the teacher.
Mm.
And that can create this pattern where we're always looking for someone else to tell us we're doing okay.
And it can be exhausting.
For sure.
Yeah.
So how do we break free?
Well, Dyer says we have to challenge these IMs.
What do you mean by IMs?
These are those limiting labels we put on ourselves, I'm not creative, or I'm bad at math.
Right, or I'm too shy.
Exactly. All those things that hold us back from, trying new things and reaching our full potential.
And Dyer says these IMs, they're often based on past experiences or things people have told us.
Right. They're not necessarily true.
Just because you had a bad experience in math class doesn't mean you're bad at math.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
So Dyer wants us to question these labels.
See if they're actually valid.
Mm-hmm. Are they based on facts or just, beliefs?
And are they helping us or hurting us?
Yeah, good question.
And this is where things get really interesting. Dyer tackles guilt and worry.
Oh, boy.
He calls them useless emotions.
He does. He has a really strong stance on this.
Yeah, I mean, he says there's nothing to worry about. Absolutely nothing.
And that might sound extreme.
It does.
But his point is that worry doesn't change anything.
It just steals your joy.
Exactly. It keeps you stuck in the past or fixated on a future you can't control.
So true. So what's the alternative?
Well, Dyer wants us to ask ourselves, what are we holding on to that's not serving us? What past events are fueling our guilt?
And what future worries are robbing us of, present joy?
Right. It's about recognizing that we have a choice in how we respond to our thoughts and feelings.
Okay, so let's talk about uncertainty.
Okay.
Dyer actually argues that this need for certainty, it can really limit our growth.
Makes sense?
Yeah, it keeps
Yeah.
us from, stepping outside our comfort
And
zones.
sometimes the best things happen outside of our comfort
Yeah,
zones.
totally. He tells this story about a client named Henry who was so afraid of the unknown that he wouldn't even leave his hometown.
Wow.
I know. It's like he was so focused on having a plan that he was missing out on life.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that sometimes clinging to certainty can backfire.
Big time. What about you? What are you afraid of? What would you do if you weren't so scared of messing up?
That's a good question for everyone to think about.
All right, let's dive into this concept of the tyranny of shoulds.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one. It's like we're always trying to live up to these imaginary rules
Mm-hmm.
instead of listening to our own intuition.
And making choices that actually feel right for us.
Exactly.
Dyer gives some examples like, feeling like we have to go to social events we don't enjoy.
Or follow fashion rules that don't even make sense anymore.
It's all about this pressure to conform.
Mm.
So how do we break free from these shoulds?
Well, Dyer wants us to challenge them,
Okay.
to question where they came from and ask if they're really serving us.
To define our own standards for how we want to live?
Exactly. It's about recognizing that true freedom comes from being authentic.
Not from trying to please everyone else.
Right.
Okay, let's talk about something that can be a real struggle for a lot of people.
Yeah.
The justice trap.
Okay.
Dyer makes this point that, justice is important in society,
Mm.
but demanding fairness in our personal lives, it can actually lead to a lot of resentment and unhappiness.
Yeah, because life isn't always fair.
Right, and holding on to that expectation, it just sets us up for disappointment.
And think about how often you say, it's not fair.
Oh, all the time.
Dyer says that kind of mindset keeps us stuck in this cycle of comparison and feeling like a victim.
So what's the solution?
Well, instead of dwelling on what's fair, Dyer suggests focusing on what we can control,
Okay,
our own thoughts, feelings, and actions.
I like that.
Mm.
So instead of focusing on perceived injustices, we can focus on gratitude.
Yes, and taking action to create the life we want.
Okay, let's tackle another big one, procrastination.
Everyone's favorite.
Oh yeah, Dyer has this great quote, "It takes not one drop of sweat to put off doing anything."
That's so true.
He really gets into the psychology of why we procrastinate.
Mm.
You know how it's often an escape from things that feel unpleasant or overwhelming?
But ultimately, it's a form of self-sabotage.
Yeah, for sure. So what can we do about it?
Well, first we have to recognize it for what it is
Okay,
and understand those fears or insecurities that are driving us to put things off.
what about you? What have you been putting off? What are those fears that are holding you back?
It's a good question to ask yourself.
Okay, let's move on to this idea of psychological independence.
This is a big one.
Dyer emphasizes how important it is to leave what he calls the nest of obligatory relationships
Mm-hmm.
and become our own person.
Yeah, because dependence on others can really lead to resentment and low self-worth.
He gives the example of a marriage where one partner becomes like overly reliant on the other.
Right, and that creates this imbalance.
So it's important to look at our relationships and ask, are they based on obligation or genuine connection?
Mm-hmm.
Are we holding on to any unhealthy dependencies?
Good questions to consider.
Okay, let's wrap up this part by talking about anger.
Okay.
Dyer has this really interesting perspective on anger,
Yeah, he says it's a choice.
a habit we develop.
And while it might feel justified in the moment, it rarely leads to anything good.
He talks about how destructive anger can be,
For our relationships, our health, even our ability to think clearly.
and it almost never changes the other person's behavior.
Right.
Think about those times when you've reacted with anger. Did it actually solve anything? Or did it just make things worse?
It's worth reflecting on.
For sure.
Hmm.
So what does Dyer suggest we do instead?
He wants us to find healthier ways to communicate and set boundaries.
Okay.
And to remember that we always have the power to choose peace over rage. And it's not like they're trying to be difficult or anything.
Right. It's just that they've learned to rely on others for their sense of, well-being.
Exactly. So they might avoid making decisions on their own or taking risks.
Because they're afraid of messing up or disappointing someone.
Yeah. Or maybe they constantly seek reassurance or approval.
Which can be totally draining for everyone involved.
Definitely. So how do we cultivate this psychological independence?
Well, Dyer says it starts with recognizing our own needs and desires,
Okay.
and then having the courage to pursue them.
Even if it means going against what others expect of us.
Exactly. It's about defining our own path.
And trusting ourselves to walk it.
Oh, it can be scary.
Oh, for sure. But it's also incredibly liberating.
Okay, so now let's talk about what a person who has eliminated all these erroneous zones actually looks like.
Okay, this is where it gets really inspiring.
Dyer paints this picture of someone who is like so self-assured and free.
They're living in the present moment. They're
Mhm.
not weighed down by the past or worried about the future.
And they're not constantly seeking approval from others,
They're just being themselves.
authentically and unapologetically.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not like they're perfect or anything.
Yeah.
They still make mistakes.
But they learn from them.
Yeah, and they don't beat themselves up about it.
They're also incredibly resilient.
Yeah, they can handle whatever life throws their way.
And they do it with a sense of humor.
Which is so important.
I love that Dyer emphasizes that. It's like you can take on the world and still have fun doing it.
Exactly. You don't have to be serious all the time.
Okay, so we've talked about all these different erroneous zones and how they can hold us back. But what can we actually do to eliminate them? Like, what are some practical steps we can take?
Well, Dyer offers a lot of great advice.
Okay, like what?
Well, one of the most important things is to take responsibility for our own thoughts, feelings, and actions.
Okay, so instead of blaming others or our circumstances,
We recognize that we have the power to choose how we respond.
I like that. It's empowering.
It is. It puts us back in control.
How do we actually do that? Like, how do we shift from blaming to taking responsibility?
Well, it starts with becoming aware of our thoughts and patterns
Okay.
and noticing when we're falling into those old traps of blame or self-pity.
And then what?
We can start to reframe our thinking.
Give me an example.
So instead of saying, he made me angry, we could say, I chose to feel angry when he said that.
Oh, I see.
It's subtle, but it makes a big difference.
Because it puts the power back in our hands.
Exactly. And another important step is to challenge our limiting beliefs.
Those I'ms.
Exactly. Because if we believe we're not good at something, we're less likely to try it.
And we're more likely to interpret our experiences in a way that confirms that belief.
Right. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So we need to question those beliefs
Ask ourselves if they're really true.
and where they came from.
Exactly. And then start to replace them with more empowering ones.
That takes effort, though.
It does, but it's so worth it.
Okay, what else?
Well, Dyer also emphasizes the importance of living in the present moment.
Which we talked about earlier.
Right, because when we're caught up in the past or worried about the future.
We're missing out on what's happening right now.
Exactly. And that's where true joy and peace are found.
So how do we stay present?
Well, there are lots of different techniques.
Okay, like what?
Mindfulness meditation is a big one.
Okay.
But even just taking a few deep breaths or noticing the sensations in your body.
That can help bring us back to the now.
Exactly. And the more we practice being present,
The less power our erroneous zones will have over us.
right.
Okay, so we've got taking responsibility, challenging limiting beliefs, and being present. Anything else?
Well, Dyer also talks about the importance of setting healthy boundaries,
Okay.
which means learning to say no to things we don't want to do.
Even if it means disappointing people.
Exactly. Because we can't please everyone all the time.
And we shouldn't try to.
Right. It's about prioritizing our own needs and well-being.
And protecting our time and energy.
Exactly.
Okay, so boundaries are important. What else?
Well, self-love is also crucial.
Which we talked about earlier, too.
Yeah, and it's not just about, liking how we look.
Right, it's about accepting ourselves fully.
Flaws and all.
And treating ourselves with kindness and compassion.
Exactly. Like we would treat a good friend.
That's a good way to put it.
And finally, Dyer reminds us of the importance of finding joy and humor in life.
Oh, yeah.
Because when we can laugh at ourselves,
And not take things too seriously.
it helps us detach from our erroneous zones.
And see things from a more balanced perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like finding that lightness even when things are tough.
Exactly. It's a game changer.
So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive into your erroneous zones, I'm curious what resonated with you the most.
That's a good question. There's so much good stuff in this book.
I know, right? It's packed with insights.
And practical exercises, too.
Yeah, it's not just theory. It's like Dyer gives you actual tools to work with.
Which is what makes it so powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So for you, what were some of those key takeaways? Like, what are you going to take from this and apply to your own life?
Well, I think for me, one of the biggest things is just remembering that I have the power to choose. Like Dyer really emphasizes that we're not victims of our circumstances.
Right. We have the ability to create change.
Exactly. And to choose happiness.
Even when things are hard.
Yeah, and to let go of those limiting beliefs that are holding us back.
To rewrite our own stories.
I love that. That we're the authors of our own
It's
lives.
such a powerful image, right?
It is. It's
Yeah.
like we have the pen in our hand and we can choose what to write.
So what will you write?
That's the question, isn't it? And I think that's what Dyer wants us to keep asking ourselves.
To keep exploring, to keep growing.
And to never stop believing in our own potential.
Well said. So to everyone listening out there, I hope this deep dive has inspired you to take a look at your own erroneous zones.
And to start creating a life that you truly love.
Remember, this is a journey. It's not about being perfect. It's about progress.
And about embracing the incredible power we all have within us to change and grow.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
And remember, if you want more content like this, head over to our channel, Pages and Perspectives.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep living your best life.